and welcome. I'm Lisa Mitrokhin, and today we'll be comparing coloring with markers with coloring with pencils. For my marker brand, I picked my new favorite markers, Ohuhu. And for my pencil brand, I picked my all-time favorite, Black Widow, and my new favorite set, the Dragon. Now, why would anyone want to color with markers over pencils? Well, for the very obvious reason, it's faster. Markers are much faster, the colors tend to be cleaner. The coloring that you come out with ends up being really smooth. I did this with Ohuhu on white paper, and as you can see, there's no distortion or reflection at all. This looks like a print. So that's a huge advantage of markers. The disadvantage is, of course, they bleed through and they tend to be a little bit more difficult to work with. Colored pencils, on the other hand, you have a lot more control with them. You can get a lot more detail, and most colorists tend to be more comfortable with colored pencils. However, with colored pencils, especially wax pencils, you get that sheen on top of your page. And of course, it takes a lot longer to work with pencils. Now, all of these beautiful sets of art supplies that we have tend to come in these ridiculous sizes with so many options, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So what I like to do before I get started on any project is pre-select a handful of colors that I'm going to use and set the rest aside. So for my markers, I picked a whole bunch of very light skin tones, some browns, and some lilacs. Same thing for the pencils. I picked a whole range of peaches and browns and some purples, and probably I won't use all of them, but it's plenty for me to choose from. The rest goes away. I like to test my colors on scrap paper before I apply it to my coloring, especially with markers because they take a few seconds to dry. I like this color. This is number 27. And Ohuhu markers come with two sides. You have your sharp tip and your flat tip. I tend to color with the sharp tip regardless of what I'm coloring. So I'm going to start by giving the whole surface area that's a skin tone this nice light colored background. Notice how broad my strokes are. It's almost like coloring with paint. I am not at all worried about lining up the edges of my marker strokes. These markers are very gentle and very soft on this kind of paper. Notice that it takes a few seconds for the color to dry. Even though this paper agrees with these markers really well, it still takes a few seconds for it to really settle down and for all those overlapping lines of your marker strokes to really blend together. So don't get freaked out right away. Sometimes it may seem a little streaky when you start coloring with markers. It will actually even out on its own. Okay? That's it for my first layer. Let's see what we can do on the pencil side. For my colored pencil, I chose this first color to be Sandpiper. Now, it's not a perfect match to my marker, but I decided to go with Dragon, so I'm just going to work with what I have to come up with more or less the same look in the end. Again, I'm starting with just the first layer of my skin tone, which will be the lightest, and I'm evenly applying it all over. Notice that in both cases, I colored the lips as well. One of the most common mistakes that I see in coloring is people leaving the lips to the very end to add a different color to them, but that usually ends up looking a little bit unnatural. So my advice to you is prime the lips with the same base color that you're using for the rest of the skin tone, and then add on top of it as you go along. All right, on to our second color. I want to find a slightly darker tone of this very light peach, but just barely darker. This is number 27. Again, I'm working with a sharp tip. And it's hard to tell if this is the real pigment or just the marker not dry yet. So we're going to give it a few seconds to see how it settles. And if the shadow is starting to form and the color is indeed a little bit stronger, then I will keep it. But if it blends in with my base color too much, then I'm going to look for a darker pigment. And that looks nice to me. That's really gentle, very, very soft transitions. There's slight color variation already. And this is so fast. It only took me a couple of minutes to get to this point with markers. So I'm definitely loving it so far. On the pencil side, for my second color, I am going with this color called Saddle. This is more like a dark ochre, so the face on the right is shaping up to be a little bit more in the golden tones, and that's fine, as long as it's consistent. Okay, now I like this look, but it's a little bit too yellow, a little bit too golden. So I'm going to introduce another color on my pencil side. Something in the brown family. This is brick, brown brick, in fact. With this brown brick, I'm going to enhance my shadow to try to balance out the look a little bit to make it closer to what I have going on the left here. And again, I'm not going for a perfect match, but I wanted to have the same skin tone and the same general mood. When coloring with pencils, I tend to layer a lot. If you follow my channel already, or if you've taken any one of my courses, in fact, I have a Udemy course on how to color skin tones with pencils, so check that out if you haven't already. I'll put a link to it in the video description. If you have followed me at all on social media or on Udemy, or have taken any one of my private lessons, you know that I'm all about layering with pencils. So probably on this side, we'll have a lot more colors and a lot more layers. That's one of the most obvious differences between pencils and markers, is how much you can layer. Very cool. I like this skin tone. It's a little bit on like a coffee mocha side or on an olive side of a skin tone. So I'm going to try to keep balancing it to make it look a little bit more pink, like the model on the left. So I will add some actual pink. This is Lady Jane. Okay, now I'm happy with the skin tone on the right. But notice it took me twice as many colors to get to the same point with my pencils as it did with my markers. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It depends on what kind of colorist you are. For some of you, being able to sit down with more pencils and create that depth in the gradient is more valuable than just quickly achieving the effect like the one on the left. But this isn't done yet. Let's continue. $25. Let's add a little bit of a coffee tone to our marker version. The scariest thing about working with markers is creating these very smooth, very delicate color transitions, especially on something as important as a portrait. It's properly scary. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Even as I'm working on this right now, I am constantly worried about whether I'm going to ruin this or not. But if you have selected the right paper, and if you're working with markers that you're comfortable with a brand that's actually proven to be good, you should have no problems creating nice, soft gradients. Just make sure with markers to build up your colors from lightest to darkest. That's the only way to create these beautiful skin tone effects. And how do you know where to place these shadows and which pools of color to make darker and which ones to keep lighter? Well, at least on my art, I give you guys a lot of guidance and a lot of suggestions as to which areas should be lighter and which should be darker with my line work. And this page, by the way, is a free gift for all members of my community. So if you're a member, go ahead, sign on and grab your copy, print out the full page version of it, and have fun with it. If you're not a member, there's no reason not to join. Okay, now at this point, there's nothing to balance on the right side, so I'm going to continue working on my marker side with some violet. Now, shadows are naturally perceived by the human eye as a little bit violet or a little bit bluish. So I like to add a little bit of lilac or a little bit of powder blue to my shadows. In this case, I think lilac will be ideal. This color is number 84, and it looks like it's the perfect lilac for my shadows. So far, I've had no problems with blending and layering markers on this paper. I love this paper. I color on this paper all the time, but usually in pencils. This is actually only my second try with markers on Strathmore 80-pound paper, and it is delicious. I love it. Now granted, I haven't looked at the back of it yet, so I have no idea how much bleed through I have, but at least on this side of the page, there's no distortion with colors, there's no distortion with the texture of the page. The markers are not burning into the page, they're not making those horrible little textured powdery things that look like cold sweaters. None of that. So far, it's flawless. It's as if I'm just painting with paint. I find that there's a little bit more of freedom of movement with markers. I can afford broader strokes and fewer strokes. So for people who have problems with their hands, like hand cramps or arthritis, I think markers will be a lot friendlier to work with than trying to work out all that tiny little detail with pencils. If you feel like the transition from a darker color to a lighter color is a little bit too stark, or you can see too many of the strokes that you may not like, you can also use a blender marker. A lot of marker sets come with a blender and it's usually marked 0. On to our pencil side. A nice lilac called Bruise. Let's try that out. Now I feel that this Bruise is a very attractive color, but it's a little bit too much on the pink side, I would say, for the effect that I'm going for. It's nice, it's a nice undertone for the shadow that I'm building up here, but I will definitely need to bring in more colors to make this perfect. Now, could I have gone with another pencil set? Black Widow actually offers skin tone sets. If you combine all the pencils that you have in the house, probably you can find the exact match to every single color that you're using on your marker side, and that's fine. I just set out to work with the Black Widow Dragon to see if I can get the same effect with my favorite pencil set as I can get with my favorite marker set. Looking good, but like I said, not quite blue enough. So let's add a little bit of blue tongue. The Dragon set has the most exciting pencil names. If you haven't seen my live stream on the test drive of the Black Widow Dragon set, check it out. I'm gonna put a link to it somewhere on the screen or below the screen or wherever. Go watch it. It was an amazing experience. It's, I kid you not, my favorite pencil set of all times. Not just among Black Widows, but of all the pencil brands I've ever worked with. And that's saying a lot. And one of the reasons that I love the Black Widow Dragon so much is that with the selection of colors that you get in a box, you can create literally any effect, as this coloring will demonstrate. Yeah, I feel like together, the two current colors, Bruise and Blue Tongue, together they're a perfect match to the lilac that we used with the markers. So with markers, it's more important to get a large set that has enough color options that you can create effects like this. While with pencils, I feel like it's more important to get a good set, a clever set like the Dragon set that has maybe not so many colors, but professionally made and professionally put together into a set so that you can create any effect at all. I do not believe that you need to have every single pencil on the planet in order to create these beautiful skin tone effects. All right, looking good. Let's make it even darker with some more detail. With Ohuhu markers, and this may be true with all markers, I find that the pastel colors are very accurately represented on their cap tips, but the darker colors are not. So I highly recommend that you use a scrap paper like this to make sure that the color you're getting is actually the color that you want. As soon as we get into this color tone and darker, I feel like the cap tips appear a lot lighter than the colors that you get on paper. So be very careful. For instance, this number 96 looks like that on a cap and looks like that on paper. But that's not even the color we're using. We are using number 21. Now, normally if she was a human girl, I would give her a little bit more of a pink tone for her lips. But since she's this weird forest creature, I'm actually gonna go for brown on her lips. Maybe a little bit of a pink tone later, but for now, I want her lips to be more on the brown side. And that looks nice, but I want to go back to my lilac and do some blending with a color rather than the blender marker. So that's the previous color that I had here. I did a layer of lilac, then I added a little bit of dark brown shadows, and now I'm using the same lilac to blend them together. I prefer that to the blender marker. And now for the pencil side. A darker brown. This is Castle. And because we've added lilac to the marker side, I have to go back and add the same lilac tones to my pencil side. Which one was it? Bruise. That was a combination of bruise and blue tone. So back we go. The great thing about coloring with pencils is that you do have the luxury of going over the same spot as many times as is necessary to create the desired effect. With markers, there's a little bit less room for error. In fact, there's a lot less room for error. With pencils, you can even go lighter. With markers, you cannot. This is nice, but I feel like the brown on the left is a lot darker than the brown that I accomplished here. So I'm going to look for another brown, maybe a touch of evil red. Evil red. Now for some minor touch-ups, I would normally go with black, but in this case, try to find something that's close to black, but is still a natural and organic color. I think with markers, it's really easy to overdo black. So to be on the safe side, I'm going to start with this number 95, and if it's not dark enough for my purposes, then I can level up to black. But try to build up your colors until you get to the absolute darkest, which is obviously black. We're going to use this dark color just to bring out some detail around the eyes, eyelashes, eyebrows, the pupils, maybe a little bit on her nose. And that's probably it. Oh, a few of these dots from where her whiskers are attached. And I may want to just outline this hairline just for a little drama. And since we're going dramatic, let's do a little bit under the jawline. And that's it, no more on black. On the pencil side, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to bring in pure black from a different Black Widow set. This is called Midnight and this is from the Skin Tone sets. With pencils, I can use pure black because I'm building up my black over other colors. So in fact, I'm building up the shade of the colors that are underneath. And I cover all of this in my skin tone course. So if you want to learn skin tone coloring with pencils in depth, go ahead and check out my Udemy course. But my general rule of thumb is I leave the black pencil for the very end, and I don't use it in its purest form as black unless it's for tiny details like the pupils of the eyes and the eyelashes. For everything else, I'm only increasing the shade of every color that I'm adding it to. So in this case, pure black is okay. So now you see that I'm actually like moving around my page a lot more than I was in the beginning of this recording. And that's because with pencils, I'm getting a little bit of that glare. Now here I have my studio lighting and I have my page actually pinned to the board. So I don't move my page around, I move myself around. Now the glare isn't strong, but it is there. These are wax pencils. You will always get a little bit of that glare depending on the lighting in your room. Not so with markers. It doesn't matter what angle I'm looking at this picture from. There's no glare. It's just smooth, matte, as if it's printed that way. So again, some of the things to consider when you're choosing whether to go with pencils or markers. Okay, that's looking good. Oh, I forgot this little spot on the nose. I'm gonna leave it at that with the skin tones, but let me show you a little hack that I like to use. I'm going to bring in, bear with me, a Prismacolor white. This is my all-time favorite white pencil to work with. Even if you don't have the full Prismacolor set, I highly recommend that you get a set of just white pencils. Now, somebody kindly sent me a pack of 12 of these. Thank you so much. I am putting them to good use. I think I have about 6 of them left. They are great. Now with this Prismacolor white, I'm going to add just a few highlights to both versions of my coloring. How cool is that? Happy little highlights. This is particularly important because I'm working on toned paper. So bringing in these pure white highlights makes it look really professional and like a work of art, not just your typical coloring. A little bit to the teeth. Again, how do we know where to place these white highlights? At this point, the very, very basic rule of thumb is place it in the lightest areas that you have left. I love this effect. And the coolest thing about the white Prismacolor is that particularly Prismacolor white goes over anything. So markers, pencils of different brands, it's amazing. It's definitely layering a lot smoother over pencils than it did over the markers. With the markers, you can see that the pencil is a little bit chalky. Okay, I'm gonna call these skin tones done. Now, just for fun and presentation, let's add some hair color. Much better. Of course, you guys have the entire page to play with, so go ahead and finish it edge to edge and have fun with that really elaborate border. But this lesson was on coloring skin tones with markers versus pencils, so I'm not going to take this any further. However, I do want to take this page off the board and see how much damage we've done. So, the moment of truth. Oh, that's not so bad. That's not so bad at all. Obviously, on the pencil side, we didn't expect any bleed through. On the marker side, there's a little bit of a bleed through, but again, there's no damage to the paper. As you can see, the paper that I had underneath the markers has no bleed through on it. So if you were to color this in a book, you wouldn't have a bleed through onto the next page if the paper in the book is 80 pounds at least, like this one is. Now, as far as the actual result, let's compare what we have here on the marker side and the pencil side. The overall effect, I feel, is very close. Because we're working with wax pencils, we're getting that shimmer, that shine as we turn the page. It's not extreme, it's not unattractive in real life at all, but it may make photographing the work a little bit more difficult, and some colorists just don't like that effect at all. They like to have that clean, smooth, flawless finish, which with markers, you absolutely get. So as far as the results, I feel like we can get the same exact results with both, but it's the experience that was different, drastically different. With markers, I could work much faster, but I did have my limitations. I had to work from lighter to darker. There was no other options. I had to pick my colors very carefully and build them up layer after layer, making sure that my blending actually works. I was also limited by the kind of paper that I can work on. You need to either use a professional designated marker paper or a thick enough drawing paper like this 80-pound Strathmore. With pencils, we can work on pretty much anything. In case of the Strathmore paper, I was able to match the colors in both markers and pencils. With pencils, I didn't have the limitations of colors. I could keep building them up and up and up forever and ever. I could go darker, I could go lighter, I can keep balancing them. So that's a definite plus with working with pencils. However, it does take a lot longer. This coloring on the right took me about twice as long as this one on the left, but there was a lot more leeway, a lot more flexibility. On the other hand, with markers, even though you only get one shot at it, it does allow for people with slightly less stable hands to work with markers. So both get the thumbs up from me. I am properly addicted to both the Ohuhu markers and the Black Widow pencils. Will I switch to markers for my portraits? Probably not. It's an interesting thing to do. It's fun. If I need to make a really quick presentation, like a demo for a student, then I would probably use markers. But for my commission art, for my clients, I would stick with pencils because that's just me. I like that control. I also like to sit down for several hours with music on or a book on. But you decide what's right for you. You now have all the information to make an educated decision. The links to both the Ohuhu markers and the Black Widow pencils are somewhere on this screen and also in the video description below, so you can just click on that. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you'll be practicing with your markers and your pencils. If you enjoyed this video, please give it the thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to join my private community. And I'll see you shortly in the next video. Bye!